I'm George Galloway, and I present Kalima Horra on Al Mayadeen television. Here we are in London. I speak my words freely, either in Parliament, on television, here on the streets of London. Kalima Horra means free word. That's what I speak. So Kalima Horra is a two-way conversation. Check it out on Al Mayadeen television. Welcome to Kalima Horra with me, George Galloway, on Al Mayadeen television, coming to you from London, discussing Afghanistan and what it means for the region and the world. Alexander the Great failed successfully to occupy Afghanistan, and so every empire since has similarly failed. In fact, some of us, the British, have gone back time after time after time for the beating. There have been many, many occupations attempted by the big imperial powers of the day, but no occupation like this one. This occupation, which just ended after 20 whole bloody years, cost the Americans $2.3 trillion, cost the lives of hundreds of thousands of people, and destroyed Afghanistan, north, south, east, and west. And yet it ended in total ignominy, leaving all of the tyrants that currently shelter under the power of the United States quaking in their boots, because they saw, just like in Saigon all those decades ago, the American empire scuttling, escaping from the jaws of defeat. They saw the satraps left by the United States scurry away on their aeroplanes, usually carrying large black plastic bags full of their ill-gotten gains. So what was it all about? Why, if agreement with the Taliban to leave the country and for them to reassume power could be made in 2021, why wasn't it made in 2011, or for that matter, in 2001? If the Taliban were okay to come back into power, when did they become okay? Is there a new Taliban? Has there been a deal done? Do the United States hope that they can use Afghanistan against the neighbors, particularly Iran and the former Soviet Asian republics? Is it the intention of the empire to set up a new front, a new northern alliance, so that they can stay in the war game, perhaps remotely from outside? Is the Taliban reformed? Will they have learned their lesson from the mistakes that they made in the past? Will they stop their territory from becoming again a playground for the obscurantists of Al-Qaeda and the even darker obscurantists of ISIS? Does China have anything to fear? Does Russia? Does Iran have anything to fear from the return of Taliban 2.0? I'm the amateur. Here are the experts. First up, Hadeedullah Nazeem, an Afghan journalist who was close to the talks in Doha, in Qatar, and who might very well be able to give some of the answers to my questions. Welcome, sir. Was there a deal at Doha? Did it involve any of the issues that I raised in my opening remarks?
Afghanistan is nowadays in very critical situation, and the Doha agreement was absolutely, it was a very good step to deal with the Taliban, because from last 20 years they were not succeed to beat Taliban or to control the country or to bring the proper government in Afghanistan, that means the world community had no alternative as well. In that case, they have to deal with the Taliban, but they did deal with the Taliban, but that deal did not get support from the people who were being from the Western countries in Afghanistan. I mean Ashraf Ghani or the other Northern Line, or who was their friends. They were not supported that deal. They completely didn't support it. They destroyed the deal, nearly. If they supported that deal was very, if you may, I'm sure you guys read it, that deal. It was a positive step for the world, for the region, for the Taliban, for the Western countries. But unfortunately, they didn't.
Esteemed Honorable Sheikh Dr. Kamal Helbawy, scholar of the first rank, ontology is important. So let's define the Taliban in 2021. What differences are there between the Taliban that left power in 2001 and has now come back to power 20 years later?
It is really very serious, not only for Afghans or Asians or Muslims, but for the whole world to learn the lessons from Afghanistan. And I used to say during my stay there for some time in the 80s and 90s, who will not learn from the lessons of Afghanistan will never learn the future. And I think this is what Americans are trying to do after long, bloody wars and era. Taliban, I have very good relations with 3-4 important characters of them, whom I call the fathers of Taliban. This is not so many people know. Of course, Hadeedullah is here and he can confirm. The first one is Mawlawi Muhammad Nabi, Harakat Inqilab Islami, who had a great effort during the jihad against the Soviets. Mawlawi Muhammad Nabi. The second one is Yunus Khalis, who was a part of Hikmatyar and then divided and made his own Islamic party, Yunus Khalis. The third one is Mawlawi Jalaluddin Haqqani, whom we read now about his Anas or Siraj or Haqqani network. So these are, with others, are the real fathers of Taliban, not Muhammad Umar. And there are 3 terms that people should understand. Mawlawi, this is a top rank. Mullahs, like Mullah Umar and Mullah Abdul Ghani brother and others. And then Taliban, I say there is a new version of Taliban. These are not the Taliban whom we understood or whom we met, whom we discussed with or others. And the new version, I see big difference. I see big difference, maybe because of prisons, maybe because of the different lessons, maybe because of the destruction the Americans brought to Afghanistan, maybe because the Mujahideen, the first Mujahideen against the Soviets, did not fight against the Americans when they came. There are many reasons. And this is quite...
Are these positive differences or negative?
Some of them are positive and they left a good impact. Some of them who lived in Iran, who lived in Pakistan, who lived outside Afghanistan, they witnessed a change of strategies, policies, education, maybe due to some of the discussions of that has gone in far in depth into Doha, people of Taliban who were imprisoned in Guantanamo, who were in Bagram base, who were in Pakistani prisons, America politely invited them to sit with them in Afghanistan and discuss. This is a big change. The change is going on in the world, and Taliban is a part of the world. The new version of Taliban is quite different, but still, they did not achieve what we call modern Taliban.
Well, we'll come back to that. Let's hear from the United States, from Australia, much in the news now, from Major David McBride. He was a former British Army officer in Afghanistan and served there also with the Australian Army and became a whistleblower about war crimes committed by the Australian Army in the field. He's waiting trial, not of the war criminals, but of himself for blowing the whistle. Major McBride.
Thank you.
Why did the US withdraw from Afghanistan, do you think?
It could no longer pretend that it was a victory. And they had no choice, really, but just to lose more and more people and to lose more and more popularity. The show was over. I don't believe that they were ever really there with the right reasons. They were using the invasion and the occupation of Afghanistan to create a certain appearance, to make America look strong. But that charade was no longer believable.
Would that be a lesson then that they've learned? They'll never occupy another country for 20 years?
I'd like to think so, but in order for them to learn a lesson, there needs to be some accountability. There needs to be some trials. There needs to be an equivalent of an inquiry, as they had after various failures in the 1970s. But I can't see that happening. And what I suspect will happen is that the next administration, or as soon as they can, they will again launch another war, just as they launched this war, an invasion, after having not learned the lessons of Vietnam, because unfortunately, under a democracy like America, where a lot of people are not necessarily that well informed, making war against enemies who seem to be very sinister is popular, and it wins elections. You see, President Biden's popularity has gone down, even though what he did was quite sensible and inevitable, and that he finished the war. Whereas all those presidents before him for the last 20 years who committed more troops to a hopeless cause, their popularity was okay. And I think the next president is unfortunately likely to go back into another war with another country.
You've made serious allegations of war crimes against the Australian occupation force. Is it likely that similar war crimes were committed by the United States, by the United Kingdom?
Undoubtedly. In fact, one of the reoccurring things that happened in the inquiries into the Australian war crime was that the Australians had learnt some of the practices from the Americans and from the British Special Forces soldiers who had been attached to the Australians. And the Americans and British had said to them, you don't have to worry about killing civilians. You just plant a weapon on them afterwards, which you've found somewhere, take a photo and say, oh, he was a Taliban. And this practice was copied from the British and the Americans. the Australians were by and large quite well disciplined. And we had quite a lot of checks and balances, but still the inquiries have said there are 39, I believe was the figure, of probable murders, things that have to be investigated. But that was very diplomatic word for things that are probably murders. Now, I would take it that there would be many, I would probably say, well, I wouldn't be surprised if there was 100 times that in the whole of Afghanistan when you took into the American, some of the American territories was very little discipline and a lot of fighting. And if you include the drone, some of the revelations from Daniel Hale, the drone whistleblower, you would have hundreds and hundreds of murders going on in that, and not mistakes, cold-blooded murders. It's quite disturbing. And no one in Britain was put on trial, even though cases were prepared. And no one, well, some people in America have been put on trial and some of them have been let out. There certainly hasn't been very many trials in America.
Major, did these war crimes contribute to the growing strength and popularity even of the resistance of the Taliban? Absolutely.
We had stories from very reputable journalists who spent years in Afghanistan and risked their lives speaking to the local people. It was hard because the local people said, we don't trust journalists, we don't trust NGOs, we think that you're all part of a sinister campaign to kill us all. But eventually when they opened up, people who were in the Taliban said things like, I joined the Taliban because the Australians came to my village, shot my brother, who was not Taliban, and it destroyed our family. And then I heard a rumour, or I heard a fact that the Australians said my brother was Taliban, and they showed a photo of him with a weapon. And I was so angry about this, I joined the Taliban, and now I'm going to dedicate my life to fighting the Australians.
And finally, Major, as I said at the beginning, you blew the whistle on crimes, and there will be trials, principally your own trial, which you currently await. Do you feel that that is an injustice?
Well, it shows what a dystopian world we are living in. I'm glad I'm on trial because it's the only way that we're going to get justice. It's too easy for the government, who control large sections of the media, to cover up what went on. But when I'm on trial, I will be able to say the government committed crimes, the government covered up crimes, the government lied to the public, and people will have to listen. Otherwise, no one would ever listen. I am facing a lifetime imprisonment, but I've got no second thoughts about it, because unless people do what I'm doing, we will never see justice, and the Western world will just get further and further down into losing all its values and just having this incredibly corrosive nationalism where it is okay, anything which is to do with what we call national security, which could be a pack of lies. It could be murders of innocent people, that is covered up, despite the fact that it goes against all our principles. So the trial, it's a high-risk strategy for me, but I believe it's the only way to get justice for the murdered people, and it's the only way to change the downward spiral of ethics in the Western governments.
David Lawley-Wakelin, you heard that there. Julian Assange is in prison. Craig Murray's in prison. Major McBride is facing a lifetime in prison. You're a documentary filmmaker who've made films inside Afghanistan. You're also an anti-war campaigner. We've marched many times together. You got off lightly so far.
Yes.
How do you see this collapse of a 20-year ruinous war.
Well, it's extraordinary. I think, how brave is that man to be standing on trial for whistleblowing? And there's not many of us who would go that far. But I think it's extraordinary now to see what is about to come, and that to America are about to have the biggest lesson taught to them by probably the Chinese, who are going to go in and diplomatically sit down at the table, discuss the future with the new Taliban that we've just heard about, and they're going to come to a business deal for the billions of mineral wealth that is lying now underneath Afghanistan that the Taliban have the control over. The opium business, which is worth 20 billion and around 10% of the...
Do you think that will continue? Because the Taliban crushed it before.
Well, they did at the beginning, but now they're supporting it, and exponentially it's grown, the opium business, year in, year out, since 2011 when we went there, you know, the Americans. And it's gone up every single year. And when I was there making my documentary, it's a very interesting thing. I was taken by police escort because it was the only place that really was dangerous when I went in 2013, the year before Karzai ended his tenancy, was Kandahar. You could not go to Kandahar because if you went there, the chances were you would have your head chopped off or something. But they said to me, we'll take you in there with a police cordon, a car in a police plane. You could stay one night, 24 hours in a secure hotel with security guards and so on. I was taken there and driven around the whole of Kandahar in a cab with a very small camera with me all the time. And what became apparent, there was a big CIA base there that was right on exactly the same location as Mullah Omar's original palace at the beginning of the Taliban when it all started. And it was clear then that they were putting money into the opium business, and it's never discussed. And it's never discussed this 10% of Afghanistan's GDP, the Americans, and it went up every year that they were there, they were in cahoots. Now, I'd love to ask our friend, the gentleman from Doha...
You'll have to wait to the second half for that, because we've run out of time for the first half, but there will be much, much more of this after the break. Stay tuned. You're watching Kalima Horra with me, George Galloway, on Al Mayadeen Television, coming from London, discussing Afghanistan and what it means for the region and for the world. David, you were in full flow when I had to stop you. What's your question about the narcotics business?
Well, I just wonder, clearly Donald Trump, who was a businessman, he went to Doha, he looked at the whole of the balance sheet for Afghanistan. It was costing them 60 billion every year just to keep the American bases and troops and so on there. They had really not been doing anything other than keeping an occupation and a presence there and doing business in the opium. It's fascinating. The Germans, a German economic forum, have discovered there was a direct correlation between the price of opium in Afghanistan and the price of opiate pain-killing drugs in America, which are killing over 100 Americans every month from opiate painkiller addiction. And there was a direct correlation between the price of opium on the streets in Kandahar and streets in Afghanistan and the price of opiate drugs in America. And this was never discussed. Now, what Trump seemed to have done in his deal in Doha, which I'm hoping to find more information about, is he's looked at the balance sheet. He said, we've got this much from the opium and the minerals and so on and so forth, but it's still not as much as we're spending. We're spending these billions, we're out, we're gone. And they've pulled out, and they've pulled out from an occupation. Nobody else is going to now go to Afghanistan, as you've pointed out at the beginning of the programme, George. You cannot win in Afghanistan. The Afghanis are the shrewdest, most clever, mountainous bunch of tribes of very skilled armsmen who will never be taken by anyone. But the Chinese now are going in.
They'll try and do it.
They'll do it. They'll go in and they'll build the infrastructure.
Let's ask Hadeedullah about that. It wouldn't. I mean, I know that it's a modern Taliban, but it would be shredding all principles of Islam to allow the production of opium, wouldn't it, in Afghanistan? Do you think, as David does, that the Americans did a deal on that?
Thank you very much. I just want to mention one or two words about the Sheikh talk about to change the Taliban. That's the reality. Taliban has been changed much from the 2001 and now. because of the one thing is automatic human life experience, 20 years experience. At the time when Taliban came to power, they were just new with everything, but now they have a lot of experience. They have experience to how to run the government. They have experience how to deal with the world community. They have experience how to deal with the neighbors. They have experience to how to deal within the country, with the other political parties, with other people, or women or women, with all population. That's the clear. There has been change and there has been improved. Nowadays you can find PhD holder in their list, master holder. In around the world they studied and they've been back to join the Taliban leadership. Like in Doha, when I've been to there, I saw them 3-4 PhD holders. Before that, in 2001, there was no single PhD holder within the Taliban. That is a big improvement and big change. The other things I just want to mention to you, guy, I'm not a journalist as well, and I'm not taking or defending any side as well. I just want to tell my opinion and explain the situation. As Mr. David explained about the drug control or opium control, Taliban in 2001, if you go to the United Nations report within 2002, I think, if I'm not wrong, and they bring it to the zero.
Yes,
to the
they
zero.
got an award from the UN.
From last 20 years, the percentage of the production, opium production, was not down from 97%. Like they did not bring it to 3 or 4%, but Taliban bring it to 2%. Think about compare between two. I just want to finish. The Taliban, when, like as you mentioned in Kandahar, and that's just, there is no evidence. I am sure you cannot provide proper evidence to who did the Taliban leadership deal with the drugs. Because by the religious, Taliban are, one thing we should be remember, whatever they're doing, that's their business, but they are a religious, respected group or whatever. In their religion, the drug control, as George mentioned, they stop. They're telling clearly in Quran, Sheikh know that, do not use the drugs, whatever business you involve, it's haram. That means Taliban not doing that because they're
so will they crush it now?
They crush it.
Back as they did in 2000.
They crush it, but one thing I want to mention it. If the world community help them, support them, consult them to bring it to the political structure, to run their country, because Afghanistan is middle of the somewhere, they don't have access, they don't have any proper emergency income, they don't have tax money to straight away coming from the people, the packet, and bring it to the bank. They don't have that system. They need to have some time to make money to spend it. If the world community support them as a positive political way, bring it to the proper political structure, I am 100% believe they can come to the right path. They will not use the drug, because the drug production is not easy. It's not a clean job. I'm from Afghanistan. I grew up in my land, and we had a land. They used to be like this bloody poppy, but we will never be happy to grow up these things if we have alternatives to get the food on. That's
Dr. Kamal, as Hadeedullah put it peerlessly, Afghanistan is in the middle of somewhere. We all know what it's in the middle of. 3 of the United States' prime enemies are surrounding Afghanistan. ISIS and Al-Qaeda are also dedicated enemies of these 3. Iran, China, Russia. Will Afghanistan again become a place where ISIS and Al-Qaeda can mount terrorist actions against the neighbors?
Serious point and question. But before that, let me add only one sentence about opium and the drugs in Afghanistan. Taliban will crush it to the percentage they believe that it is haram. Only for one reason, they will allow some of it for medical purposes. because for medical purposes, it will not be haram. This is my understanding, and this is their own view as well that has been expressed. Coming to America and enemies for America, let me say, for the first time in the history of America, for the first time, they changed drastically and think drastically with changing their philosophy, their strategy, and their policies for the first time. After many, many years, if you listen to the commentators and to Biden remarks and to the commander-in-chief in different occasions, we will get to these points. First of all, they need a new strategy that can clearly make achievable goals not one will ever achieve. And mostly related to national security interests, local security interests. Number two, their decision to pull out from Afghanistan is not just about Afghanistan, as Biden said. It is about an era of major military operations to remake other countries. America is mad. The politicians are mad. The politicians there use their minds to reshape the world according what they do believe. Not only in politics, because this can be accepted, but also in religion.
But surely they've learned, America has learned in Afghanistan that you can no longer occupy a country and take it over. You cannot go in and colonize or occupy anymore. Those days, I think, hopefully,
I think we're all agreed on that. Can you deal with my question about ISIS and Al-Qaeda?
Yes, I am coming to that.
Are they coming back?
I am coming to that. So it is ISIS is not now in Afghanistan only, but it is in Syria, it is in Iraq, it is in different parts of the world, and this is what the Americans are thinking of. We are not going to chase the danger in Afghanistan. 20 years ago it was, but nowadays it is in different parts. So I am sure that ISIS and others are not serious in Afghanistan as they are, and even ISIS and Al-Qaeda are not the same like the time of Bin Laden or Zawahiri. The time has gone. Things changed. And Taliban, they are not supportive of terrorist acts at all. At all. They do not support that. But they guaranteed the safety and the security of Bin Laden at some time, during the time of Mullah Omar, and Zawahiri after him, during the time of Akhundzad and Mullah Mansour and others. This time has changed. The world is changing. America is changing its strategy. So we have to understand that America is not a charity. Let me say to the whole world, America is not a charity. America, they have their own interests.
Let's hear from another Afghan, Mohammad Asif, former constituent of mine in Glasgow, in Scotland. He's the chair of the Scottish Afghan Society. Nice to see you again.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you.
Good to see you again, Asif. Why did the US withdraw from Afghanistan?
I think because the US withdrew from Afghanistan, firstly, they failed because when after 9/11 and when the US and Britain went to Afghanistan, when we were asking for a government in Afghanistan which would be represented to the people of Afghanistan, but what the US and Britain did in Afghanistan was They empowered the most vicious warlords and, murderers and, corrupt officials on the face of the planet. So that was the very first failure. And also in the Bonn Agreement in Germany in 2001, when there was an interim administration established, led by the most corrupt person, Hamid Karzai in Afghanistan, it did not include, the biggest ethnic group in Afghanistan who call themselves the Pashtuns. So that was another failure by the West. The foundation was, really, really bad. It wasn't really built on the people of Afghanistan, but preferences were given to the warlords and, the former Afghan warlords who used to fight against the Russians. And then in the 90s, they fought among each other. So these warlords were brought by the American and British. And that was, a failure itself in Afghanistan. And later on, when the American, spent, as they say, they spent more than 2 trillion in Afghanistan. The British say they spent nearly 28 billion. But these money were not spent on the Afghans. And then you have the American and British plus the Australian and the French, flying their drones or their planes, night raids, bombing innocent people. When you bomb a family, whoever is remain or whoever is left alive, that person definitely was going to join the Taliban, because you bomb their family in the name of Al-Qaeda, in the name of Taliban, where these were all innocent people. It's not just me who said it. It's the Amnesty International, the International Human Rights Watchdog, and other governments. They were war crimes committed by America and Britain and Australia and Canada and other in the French in Afghanistan.
You exposed on Kalima Horra some years ago the behind-the-scenes talks, negotiations that were going on, and now we know that an agreement was reached. Now that we know what the agreement was, in other words, withdrawal and a return to power of the Taliban, why wasn't that agreement reached a long time before?
There was always talks between the Taliban and the American administration or the British or foreign administration. There was always some sort of unofficial talks until the Doha office was established with the request of the American and other allies of the United States. So when they established the Doha office for the Taliban and released most of the Taliban prisoners from Guantanamo Bay, and also the American pressured Pakistan to release the founding member of Taliban movement, Mullah Baradar. So from there, they started the agreement, the talks of, a peace deal between the United States and the Taliban. And the deal specifically mentioned, that you do not attack our interest, because, the American has reached a point that a war is not winnable in Afghanistan, although, we were saying this for the past 20 years, that Afghanistan needs a political solution rather than a military one. So when the American really, really realized that we're spending billions and the Taliban are day by day, getting more powerful, because the Taliban not only getting support from, other countries, so they become a major power, and it was impossible for the Americans. So the American has to do as they have always did, to sign some dirty deals, with the rogue regimes and, as they call them, dictators and terrorists and, brutal or barbarian individuals. So they started to sign a peace deal with the Taliban, the Doha Agreement, that you do not attack our interests. You can do whatever you want to do with the Afghan security forces or the Afghan government, as long as you don't touch our interest, our security forces in Afghanistan.
You must have expected the withdrawal of foreign forces from Afghanistan. Indeed, I've stood beside you on demonstrations demanding exactly that thing.
Yes, I'm an anti-war activist. I call for the withdrawal of American and British troops many, many times for the past 20 years. But this was not the way that America has to live in that manner. That itself shows that how cowards and how, failed they were in Afghanistan, that they wanted to leave within, a week's time and abandon everything, and disintegrate, the entire Afghan military force or the Afghan army, which was built in the past 20 years. How is that possible that within 7 days or 9 or 11 days, the whole Afghan security forces, which were like 300,000, and they have probably, a good amount of weapons, and then suddenly the Afghan army refused to fight. So there was a deal behind the scene. Every Afghan military commander or every Afghan, in a higher position were given, some sort of incentive in cash money that you go home and don't fight against the resistance of Taliban. And America now want to blame the Afghans, or the Afghan security forces, because they were not in charge. It was you who was in charge. It was you who occupied our country. It was you who killed our brothers and sisters for the past, 20 years during night raids, during, waterboarding, during rendition flights.
Well, we know at least that the pact that the US made with Afghanistan involved them leaving, perhaps not quite in the hurry that they did. Do you think there are any more surprises to be found in the agreements?
I think that the countries around Afghanistan, including America and Britain, as I said, this all happens with the knowledge of the United States. What happened, the fall of Afghan regime and the empowering of Taliban, these happen all with the knowledge of America and within their permission. So now the future is very bleak. The American wants to see the Taliban, whether they will keep their promises. I doubt it very much that the Taliban will keep any promise, because now they are in power. They don't need to keep any promise. They're not in negotiation with anyone in Afghanistan, because every warlords and drug lords in Afghanistan, they have fled, to foreign countries. There is no resistance at all against the Taliban. But I think the conflict will be between the, superpowers, Russia, China, the United States, Iran, Pakistan. These countries will want to have more influence over the Taliban and see how the Taliban progress, in the future. But I think Taliban are going there for a long run, and they're not there for 1 day or 1 year or 2 years. I campaign against the rule of Taliban. I campaign against them in the past for what they did to innocent people. But now the Taliban are in power. I think the best thing for the world is to work with Taliban and for the sake of the Afghan people. It's not for the sake of the Taliban. We have the Afghan people, nearly 28 million have no food right now. People are dying of hunger. And, if you do not pressure the Taliban to keep to their promises, I think, there will be a lot of problems in the near future. But as I said, the Taliban in a very strong position now. They don't need to negotiate with any warlords in Afghanistan, because all of them have fled. So they have a free hand of handling the Afghan affairs.
It is an interesting point, David, isn't it? How quickly it all collapsed. I mean, if there was a deal, how could that deal not have been done last year, 10 years ago, more years ago? Why did they scuttle out, as President Putin described it, like they escaped from Afghanistan, leaving $80 billion worth of military hardware behind?
Well, it's quite extraordinary, and no one really will ever come to understand it, but the intelligence services had no idea of the mentality and understanding of the friendship between Afghans on the ground. If you have if you're running an enormous country or an enormous company, and a new boss turns up one day, you have no idea really who your boss is. Your boss, if one load of guys is paying you $40 a month to be a soldier for them, the government are paying you $40, and then the Taliban comes along and says, they've gone, we're the new boss, we're giving you $60 a month. It comes down to economics. If you're either unemployed, or you take your gun and work for the old government, Ashraf Ghani, who's legged it off to Turkmenistan, or you're going to come with us. We're the new boss, we're the Taliban, and we're going to pay you $20 more every month. And it comes down to economics. It comes down to, do you want to be unemployed, or do you want to come and work for the Taliban? And they knew who the new boss was coming, because they could watch on their television screens, town after town after town, the Taliban were taking them. And so everyone said, right, this is the new boss. This is our new managing director of the company. We are now working for the Taliban. We're no longer working for for the Americans or for the Afghan corrupt government, which
meet the new boss.
Yes.
Just the same as the old boss. Is that? I mean, what will the Taliban do with $80 billion worth of hardware? Can they fly these Black Hawks? Where are they going to fly them? Who are they going to fight with them? These are all intriguing questions for we Westerners interested in your Afghan expertise.
I think I just want to mention some things when we had in discussion coming to your questions. First, I agree with Mohammad Asif, and the world community should work with them by political structure in political path. The war was mess war from last 20 years. It doesn't work. We fail. In every occasion, the world community, Taliban, Afghanis, international communities, they fail in this war because we are in the same part in 20 years ago we were. That's clear. The other things is like before Sheikh mentioned and you mentioned about the ISIS. The ISIS, the Taliban signed agreement. One thing I mention it again, they are strict with their words. As far as we following this media from last 20 years between Taliban in America and in Afghan Kabul government, Ashraf Ghani or Karzai or now the airlines, whoever, Taliban are strict with their words. They sign the agreement. They say we will not support, we will not help with any ISIS or any terrorism. In the first point, we Afghanis, as far as I understand, I am not believing ISIS was product from somewhere or ISIS was some or whatever. ISIS was bring it in the aeroplane and drop it in Kabul city, Bagram city, and Jalalabad city. Whoever brought, wherever they brought, that's we don't know. We don't know. Because when they were in the catch-up area, in the control area with the Taliban in Kunduz, they take it out 300 from there in the plane, bring it to where? Where they're going? We don't know. That means ISIS was not product of Afghanistan. The people who were ISIS, they were not product of Afghanistan. Taliban are absolutely against the ISIS.
Dr. Kamal, insofar as the ISIS Khorasan is in Afghanistan now, they were transplanted there, weren't they, from Syria and from Iraq? That's how they're there. Who transported them?
This is a very serious as well question. Who transported them? I don't think that the CIA is playing. They are doing their work. They are doing their serious work to reshape the future and remake, as Biden said, some other countries. They tried. In Iraq, they tried in Syria, they tried in other parts. What we have to say here, that Taliban will never work together with ISIS, because ISIS were not fighting Americans. ISIS have other strategy in Iraq, in Syria. They are not fighting America in Afghanistan. I hope that Taliban can write their policy, write their strategy. Don't be afraid from the Western powers anymore or the Eastern power anymore, and keep your religion, but don't show the people a restricted view on religion of Islam, because Islam is mercy, Islam is justice, Islam is very progressive, but don't always be cheated by civic democratic Islam. We are not civic, we are not democratic, we are more than that. It is your belief should be fully respected. Don't be cheated by the words of Rand Corporation or other corporation on Islam or religion.
A good note to end on. I've been George Galloway. This has been Kalima Horra, and you have been a marvellous audience. Thanks for watching.